Hello and welcome to Monkey Teller and me, the Jonin Monkey, reviewing whatever comes to my head because my dog has been taken hostage. Today we are going to review 2 more episodes of Series 7 of Doctor Who, beginning with Cold War, an episode set in the Cold War, or rather a Russian submarine during the Cold War. Said submarine is sailing the northern parts of the world and testing its launching procedure of 2 nuclear missiles should they need to use them in the Cold War. They're also keeping below decks a creature that was frozen in ice, which they are hoping to take back to Russia. However, one of the crewmates does something fundamentally stupid and uses a blowtorch to melt the ice, at which point the creature escapes and causes the submarine to sink. It is at this point that the TARDIS suddenly materializes onto the sub and throws out Carla and the Doctor, who thought they were going to Las Vegas, and then dematerializes, trapping the 2 of them on the submarine. The Doctor manages to guide the sub down onto a reef, meaning that there's no danger of them sinking to the depths, but they're now surrounded by surprised Russian sailors who are not sure whether or not to trust this madman, and they are already tense anyway given that they are on a secret mission. But they're gonna have to put their mistrust and tension behind them pretty quickly, as it turns out the creature is an ice warrior from the planet Mars. Or rather, an ice warrior legend who was supposed to have been lost 5,000 years ago. And now that he sees himself trapped behind enemy lines with all of his people lost, he decides that he is going to wreak terrible revenge on humanity by launching one of the submarine's nuclear missiles and destroy the world. If the Doctor can't talk him down or find a way to defeat him, it's the end for everyone. Now, I have to say, I really like this episode. I mean, classic Doctor Who fans are probably going to like it because it's the return of the Ice Warriors, but even if, like me, you don't know who the Ice Warriors are, it's still a good episode. In fact, I would say it's a reverse Rings of Arcaten. The Rings of Arcaten had a gorgeous setting with loads of possibilities, but was incredibly weak in the storytelling department. Cold War, on the other hand, has an incredibly limited setting, which I suspect was designed to keep the budget down to a minimum, since most of the time they're walking through the corridors of a submarine, and the Ice Warrior spends most of the time hiding in the corridors or wearing armour that human actors can conveniently slip into, but is really strong in the storytelling department. Aside from the usual tension that comes from having a sinister monster on board a submarine, there are 2 strong factors in this episode's favour. First, the characters. Aside from that one idiot who set the Ice Warrior loose in the first place, no one's an idiot in this episode. The Captain quickly realises that the Doctor knows what he's talking about and has a better grasp of what's going on, and relies on his knowledge, but he isn't instantly won over by the Doctor. He doesn't welcome him with open arms. It's still his ship, and he's still on a very secret mission. So the stance he takes for this episode is, okay Doctor, I trust you, but I'm not giving you free reign over my ship. You will wait here, and if you try to escape, I will shoot you. And there's one moment where the creature grabs one of the crew members and holds them hostage, and the Doctor's desperately trying to cool them down. But during the middle of the conversation, the Captain arrives and then tenses his gun. The Doctor then does his usual thing of, no, don't shoot it. We can talk, we can settle this dispute. The Captain then goes, okay, fine, we will negotiate, but we will do so from a position of strength, and continues to point the gun at the alien. These guys are all bit parts and they're well-written characters. Even the arbitrary skeptic who assumes the Doctor and Carla are Western spies isn't doing it for the sake of being a deuce. You can see where he's coming from because they're still at war and they can't really trust a bunch of mad people who insist that the thing walking around their submarine is an alien from Mars. And that leads me on to the second strength about this episode. How they use the Cold War. Whilst you might be able to find a parallel between the Cold War and the Doctor desperately trying to convince an alien that violence is not the only way to settle a dispute, no one preaches in this episode. There is never a point where anyone goes on about how terrible war is, or how Russia and America should stop pointing guns at each other and make peace, etc. It's just a blunt matter of fact that the 2 sides are at war, and there may be a parallel between the conflict that's going on right now. But the Cold War is also used to ramp up the stakes, because there's one moment where Carla says what some of you probably were thinking when you heard my synopsis of the episode. One nuclear missile isn't going to destroy the world, is it? I mean, people will die, but the world will keep on ticking, won't it? The Doctor then points out that they're in the middle of a Cold War. America and Russia are already distrustful of each other. All it will take is one missile to hit the other side, and it's game over. The world's two strongest superpowers will go head to head in an all-out war, and billions will die from it. And that's what makes this episode so tense. It's a small setting, but so much is at stake. And again, it makes the Ice Warrior much more interesting than the standard creatures of the week. He's not eating people because he's a monster and that's what he does. He's thinking like an intelligent tactical soldier, and that's what makes this episode so tense. You're not suspending your disbelief, you know that the stakes are tremendous, and the characters are acting like real people for the most part. It's just such a good story. And that's why I give it a firm 9 out of 10. The only thing keeping it from a 10 is that, let's face it, the guy with the blowtorch was an absolute idiot. Now, the fanbase has raised a lot of criticisms of this episode, but I'm not really that sure I can agree with them. Okay, the effects look cheesy, I give you that, and a personal criticism of mine would be that the banter between Clara and the Russian professor felt kind of pointless, especially the part about trying to get her to sing. But honestly, I don't see where many people are coming from. Many people complain that it doesn't go anywhere, but I honestly think it's a good self-contained story, and honestly, the people who kept complaining that all of the various soldiers were killed off-screen, I would like to point out something. These guys were torn limb from limb as the creature used them to study the human anatomy. Doctor Who is a science fiction show that, whilst having dark concepts and still keeping things intelligent for the adult audience, is targeted at a young audience. Are you seriously saying a show aimed at children should have on-screen mutilation by a terrifying lizard creature? They barely got away with torturing a Dalek with electricity. You seriously think they would allow on-screen mutilation? The next episode is going under the creative title of Hide. Although personally, I think a better title for this episode would be What? The episode begins in a mansion during the 1970s. There is a ghost haunting this house, a ghost that can only be detected by the high-tech equivalent of an ex-special services guy, and an empath, a psychic who can read people's emotions. The two of them are studying this ghost, but all of a sudden the Doctor and Carla come along, and they say they will help them find the ghost, and this being Doctor Who, the ghost turns out to be a time paradox. That may sound like a spoiler, but trust me, it's Doctor Who. Anytime there's any supernatural element, they will always try to throw some fake scientific or some bizarre sci-fi concept to try and explain it, because, this is the series that thinks fish people from another planet is more realistic than vampires. As for the episodes, honestly, I think this is my least favourite episode of the series so far. I mean, there's not exactly anything rage-inducing about it. There's nothing as stupid as the infinite possibilities leaf, but at the same time, I just couldn't feel anything for the episode. Like, my emotional peak when watching this episode was a few bits that caused mild irritation. That's it. That's the best thing that I can say about this episode. The main problem with this episode is that it spends too much time trying to scare you and using every single trick it can find in the How to Make Horror Movies for Dummies book, and trying to be clever with various plot twists. And because of that, we can't really focus on the characters, and so we don't really have a reason to care or give a damn about half of the things that are happening. And whilst it does try to create character drama, unfortunately the writer is under the misapprehension that if you just have the character telling us what their backstory is, that can fill the quota of a character drama. And to be blunt, it doesn't, because you need to show how that backstory affects anything. Like, okay, the ghost. We do find out what it is, But that's it. There's no development beyond that. I mean, the Doctor has to rescue the ghost because the plot demands it, but there's literally nothing else. And what's even worse is that after the Doctor rescues them, they get no resolution. It just stands around and throws the occasional line of exposition, but no one even makes a faint attempt at, oh, you can stay in my place for a bit, or maybe I can take you in my TARDIS back to insert time period here, but no one even entertains the thought. You'd think you'd want some kind of emotional send-off to show how important it was and how monumental this rescue was. But no, instead they decide to throw in another freaking plot twist. Some of them would be interesting if they spend more than 5 minutes on it. In fact, there's one twist at the end that the pseudo-antagonist for this episode, which would have been great if it wasn't literally thrown in at the last minute. The episode zips by so fast, and we do occasionally get some moments where the Doctor and the supporting characters sit down and have a quiet discussion about everything that's going on in their relationships. But the problem is, it's really only the acting that makes them any good. The dialogue itself is just forced clunky exposition. There's supposed to be a romance between the ex-service guy and the empath, but we never actually get to see these two lovebirds do anything romantic. They just get to say, I love you because insert reason here, therefore you can do this. It's just really dull and lifeless to watch. There's only one moment of character drama I can think of that isn't exposition, and even then, it may just be me, but I find it really confusing. Alright, to give some context, the Doctor is now going round to that same spot at various different time periods and taking photos of it with a camera because, well, we're filling every single horror cliche in the book, so the ghost only shows up when you take a photo of it. And he travels to basically the end of the Earth, when it is just a barren wasteland. Clara stares at this woeful sight through the viewing screen, and when the Doctor comes back, she then starts going on a strange rant that every human the Doctor meets is going to die and he's still gonna live on, even after Carla has been dead in the ground for a million years. Following up with the line, are we all ghosts to you? Now I can understand feeling kinda depressed or insignificant, but I'm not sure how yelling at the Doctor about it is gonna help. Like I said, maybe it's just me, but I don't quite see the leap from barren wasteland to the Doctor thinks I'm insignificant. It's just such a bizarrely written scene, especially since the scene ends when she basically flat out says to the Doctor, what am I to you? And the Doctor replies with, and I swear this is an actual quote, you are the only mystery worth solving. Great, that's gonna raise her spirits. She no longer feels insignificant, she feels like she's a puzzle rather than a person. That's just absolutely fantastic. Oh, and I should also mention that this scene is never mentioned again. And sadly, I have to say that those points of mild irritation, most of them stem from Clara's character in this episode. There's something about the writing in this episode that just really makes her unlikable sometimes. There is one moment where it looks like the Doctor has now been trapped in the same time paradox as the ghost. The empath, who was basically creating the link between the Doctor and the ghost, collapses. And she's an absolute wreck. She's on the floor, helpless, going, I can barely speak. Clara then sits down beside her and tells her to get back in the chair and open it again. And when the ex-service guy says, look, she quite clearly can't, Clara just snaps back, well, she has to! And then storms off towards the TARDIS and angrily demands that they go straight into the time paradox after him. And when the TARDIS points out that jumping into the time paradox would not only strand the TARDIS but kill it within 10 seconds, I forgot to mention that the TARDIS has a living heart, Clara's response is, and I quote, yeah, I hear you talking, but all I'm hearing is me, 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 me. So let me get this straight. If this episode is to be believed, when the chips are down, when the Doctor is in danger, and it's up to Clara to save the day, her first course of action is to whine, stamp her feet, and act like a freaking 5-year-old in order to get someone else to save the day. And we're supposed to like this character. I guess it's meant to show that she's headstrong and that she's willing to burst into action to save the day, but honestly, the way it's written, she comes off as a selfish child and not anyone we should care about at all. Literally, the only thing interesting about her at this point is this weird paradox concept they've got going to her, which they have done nothing to explain in the last 4 episodes. We're supposed to have some progression of this plot because the Doctor asked the empath to read her at the end, and she basically just said she's an ordinary human girl, which doesn't actually surprise me since the empath reads emotions, not the actual body, which you think the Doctor would have known, but never mind. But apart from that, we know next to nothing. And now that this episode has basically set her character back several considerable steps, it's gonna take some really good character writing to make me care about her in the future episodes. Overall, this episode was a boring mess. It was too concerned with repeating horror movie cliches and trying to be clever with various plot twists, and not enough time on making its characters believable or the stakes anything we should care about. Even the 1 or 2 brief character moments we do get are only saved by the actors, otherwise they're badly written and completely forgettable. Whilst it's not exactly the worst thing that's ever come from Doctor Who, it is quite possibly one of the most unengaging things that has come out of Doctor Who. That's why I give it the score of 4 out of 10. I've been the Jonin Monkey, and join me in 2 weeks' time where we take a look at the next 2 episodes. But until then, cheerio!